to Here we go. It's recording. To a degree, I think that's unfortunate because the role of water in our lives is fundamental, and the need to recycle water is a critical need as we jam more and more people on the planet. So today I'm going to talk about one of the recent publications that we've done. I've got it here physical, and I've got it on the screen for you. You can see the cover page. In the chat, I actually had put a link to it. And this is, of all of the papers, I've written about lots of different crazy fun things, fish in South America and fish ecology in the Bahamas and seagrass in the Loxahatchee River. But this paper to me is really, really particular and significant in the work that we do in Jupiter. And honestly, when we entered this paper includes, I think, 11 or 12 years worth of data. And when we started this research, we didn't know what we were going to get. And we had good questions and we just pursued them. And I'm so excited with the results and excited to communicate those results to you today. Before I jump off the cover, my name up here in the author list, Rachel Harris, who was a former senior scientist at the Loxahatchee River District. She's now working, doing research for FWC down in the Keys. Good for her. Craig Lehman's a faculty member at Wake Forest. And Dylan Gomes, really remarkable person out in the Pacific Northwest, saved us with some of the stats we did. So if you have any hard statistics questions, I'm going to tell you to email Dylan. If you have any other questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And just to kind of start the beginning of the presentation with the end in mind, right? What are we going to talk about and what did we find? And this is a picture, hopefully it's not too grainy on your screens. This is a picture of the Loxahatchee River District's wastewater treatment plant standing up on headworks. First thing we would do at a wastewater plant is when we take trash out of wastewater because your toilet's not a trash can. And then we take sand out of wastewater because we're going to pump that wastewater, and sand likes to wear out pumps. When we take the sand out, typically also coffee grounds come out and corn comes out. So if I'm doing a tour of the wastewater plant for junior high kids, especially junior high boys, I will definitely talk about the corn removal at this point. We come through and then the wastewater goes through. We do aeration to make the microbial organisms happy. We do these large clarifiers where the water continues moving, but at a very slow velocity. So all of the microbial biomass sinks to the bottom. That microbial biomass gets vacuumed out and sent ultimately to the Palm Beach County landfill, where we burn methane gas from the landfill to heat the biosolids, convert them into fertilizer pellets. Those fertilizer pellets are then sold to fertilizer companies, so they don't have to go mine and dig up wetlands and habitat to get phosphorus and nitrogen. They actually can recycle phosphorus and nitrogen, which means that we're preserving native habitat. So the biosolids sink to the bottom of the clarifier and go out to be made into fertilizer. The clean water goes over the top of the clarifier, goes to our big filters back here in the back. From filters over, we dose it with chlorine to kill pathogens. From the chlorine contact chamber out into our storage lakes. And so what you see is, we call this gray infrastructure because it's all concrete, and concrete, unfinished concrete's gray. So raw wastewater coming into our treatment plant generally is around 42 milligrams per liter nitrogen, and phosphorus is around 6 milligrams per nitrogen. And by the time that water leaves our concrete infrastructure, the nitrogen's down to just under 20 milligrams per liter, and phosphorus down to 3. So this is not an advanced wastewater treatment plant. If it was, those values would be much lower. It's a secondary treatment plant. But then we go right from here into on-site lakes. We ultimately go to off-site storage lakes, and then ultimately pump out of the off-site storage lakes to sprinkler heads. And really the exciting news here is what's going on with the nutrients as we leave the gray infrastructure and go through the green infrastructure. And so you'll see we started at 42 milligrams per liter nitrogen and 6 for phosphorus. We leave the plant at 19.7, or we'll call that 20 and 3. And then the water leaving our lakes are dropped from 19 down to about 6 milligrams per liter, and for 3 down to about 2. We go to the offsite lakes. These are dropped further from 5.7 to 4.2, 1.8 to 1.5. And ultimately, when the reclaimed water is coming out of sprinkler heads, we're all the way down at 3.7 milligrams per liter nitrogen and 1.2 milligram per liter phosphorus. And so this huge drop from 42 and 6 to 3 and 7, or also from 20 and 3 down to 3.7 and 1.2, that significant drop here, we could achieve these same levels if we had advanced wastewater treatment on site. But we know that advanced wastewater treatment on site is an energy hog. It uses a ton of energy, so FPL, right? So we would be paying for FPL to run their electricity generators, creating greenhouse gas emissions. But we definitely could, with more chemicals, more electricity, more manpower, we could treat this water using concrete to get to these levels. But guess what? We're getting all the way to these levels using these natural systems, this green infrastructure. And so the carbon emissions of using these green infrastructure, the beauty is the carbon emissions, the cost, the energy that we'd have to buy, and the negative impacts on the environment are trivial when compared to what it would cost if we were doing advanced wastewater treatment. So that's really honestly the whole presentation. If you're a quick learner and you check out, you've heard the main points, but I'm going to try and give you some more detail as we go through here. And our highlights, right? Water scarcity, right? The fact that fresh water is critical and valuable means that we have to recycle water. We have to think of smart ways to recycle water. Green infrastructure significantly reduced our reclaimed water nutrient concentrations. That, right, the nutrient reductions as we go through these green systems, we see massive nutrient reductions, meaning that we're not likely to see downstream eutrophication. Nutrient levels over here are similar to what we would have achieved if we did advanced wastewater treatment over here. But we did this at a fraction of the dollar cost and at a fraction of the greenhouse gas emissions. Fertilization in areas where you're irrigating with reclaimed water, fertilization should be proportionately reduced relative to the nutrients in the water. And irrigation with reclaimed water, and this is such a clear and strong finding, but irrigation with our reclaimed water, the way that we do this, did not result in downstream eutrophication. That is, the areas downstream of where our reclaimed water is being used to meet landscape irrigation, those downstream water bodies are not impaired. The nutrient concentrations are not above numeric nutrient criteria. The ecological indicators suggest those are healthy waters. So that key findings and exciting findings for us. So our reclaimed water, these are just some big numbers snapshot, right? So the period of this paper is January 2011 to December 2022. So we recycled almost 30 billion gallons of wastewater. We treated 30 billion gallons, and that turns out to just under 7 million gallons a day. We have a deep injection well. Whenever it rains and our storage lakes are full and we have nowhere else to put that water, we have to throw that water away down a deep injection well. We could, of course, dump it into the Loxahatchee River, or we could flood our local neighborhoods, and we don't think either of those are smart opportunities. So in our case, when we have excess water, we throw that water away in a deep injection well, which effectively takes that water out of the local water cycle. So if we look at daily averages over this big period, 6.8 million gallons treated on average, an average day, 1.5 million gallons disposed of in the deep injection well. And keep in mind, we don't do this amount every day, but rather typically we're 100% reclaimed water being recycled. And then during very wet periods, we'll be 100% reclaimed water going down the deep injection well. And then finally, 22.3 billion gallons. So, right, the overwhelming majority of the wastewater that we receive is actually recycled to meet landscape irrigation needs. And that's about 5.1 million gallons per day. And this is a fun picture. Recently, we were canoeing, kayaking the Loxahatchee River with a Loxahatchee River Management Coordinating Council, and this is Jocelyn O'Neill, our environmental educator coordinator, and Bud Howard, and a bunch of other people, Dick Roberts, old retired park biologist, and others. We were all out on the river during an exceptionally low water period. And the Loxahatchee is a treasure. It is a national treasure. It's a beautiful river. It's a national wild and scenic river. Number one threat to the river is not enough freshwater base flow during the dry season. So our reclaimed water system, by recycling, upwards of 7 million gallons of water a day, that reclaimed water system means that's 7 million gallons that local users are not pulling out of the ground. And then that means that's 7 million gallons per day that is available to the river and to other native habitats. And so to us, that recycling program is critical on safeguarding the minimum or the base flows down the river. But then there are so many other factors that relate to the health of an ecosystem. So having the appropriate amount of water flowing down the river is key. And we know that we're violating the MFL and that we need more water, but at least we've protected the amount of water that we're recycling, and it is reaching the river, not our recycled water, but the native groundwater. And then another thing, so the amount of water reaching the river, but then the quality of water. And if you've been paying attention, you know that inappropriate fertilizer application can lead to eutrophication. And eutrophication, if you don't know this word, it's a great word at cocktail parties. It means enriched nutrients in water, which typically results in algae blooms. So that's, to me, layman, right? Eutrophication means you're adding too much nutrients, typically nitrogen and phosphorus, to water, and those excess nutrients typically result in an overabundance of algae. So we know excess fertilizer application can lead to eutrophication, and eutrophication is bad. But what about landscape irrigation with reclaimed water? And when we started this project, this was a true, honest question that we wanted to look in the mirror and say, we need to know, is our reclaimed water system beneficial to the river, neutral to the river, or harming the river? We knew it was beneficial from the amount of water that was safeguarded to the river, but was it harmful to the river on nutrients reaching the local watershed? That was our key question. So, right, we're going to try and be honest. This is Abacoa Golf Course, standing on one of the greens here. This lake is filled with our recycled water. And we're asking the question, what is the concentration of nitrogen and phosphorus in reclaimed water? How much nitrogen and phosphorus are loaded to lawns as a result of irrigating with reclaimed water? And is supplemental fertilization necessary if I irrigate with reclaimed water? And then finally, does responsible landscape irrigation with reclaimed water lead to eutrophication, right, or excess nutrients and algae growth? Does it lead to eutrophication of downstream waters? And if you're more of a scientist, biologist like me, you kind of like pictures like this. If you're an engineer, maybe you prefer this picture. This is actually a great graphic. If you'll give me a minute and let me walk you through this. So we're going to start in our water system at the drinking water plant in Jupiter, which is kind of near Indiantown Road and Central Boulevard. So we're going to start there. Town of Jupiter is getting water that they make into drinking water from the shallow groundwater and also from the Floridan aquifer. The shallow groundwater they treat with nanofiltration membranes, and the dirty water coming off of the nanofiltration membranes is what they call concentrate. It's not saline because it's from the shallow groundwater, the shallow aquifer. That water, it does not have excess salts like the deep Floridan aquifer water does. So that the reject from the shallow groundwater membrane treatment gets discharged and blended with our recycled water in our lakes. So I just want to tell you, Town of Jupiter is going to make drinking water. The dirty water they're going to send to us, and the clean water they're going to send out to all of our customers, right? All of their customers in the community. And these houses are pictorially in Abacoa, And so you'll see that the water flows through the house and then out the drains to the sewer plant. None of the drinking water is going on the lawns because by rule, all of Abacoa is only irrigated with our reclaimed water. So we have really a complete picture of water, drinking water being made available to homes, being used in homes. Once the water is used in the home, it then flows down the drain to the sewer system. Again, headworks, we take trash and sand out, we aerate it, we do secondary clarification. The biosolids are sent to make fertilizer. The clean water secondary clarification goes to sand filtration. We have 8 feet of sand we filter the water through. If it's excessively wet, we'll throw the water away down the deep injection well, and then that water is out of the local system water cycle. If it's not excessively wet, then we'll disinfect the water with chlorine, and we'll send it to our on-site lake ponds, and then we'll flow out of there, and we'll flow through these 4 very large lakes. All of these are right on site on our wastewater plant, totaling about 80 acres of lakes. And then we will pump that water from our lakes out to all of our customers. And our customers are Trump National, Jupiter Hills, River Bend, Golf Club of Jupiter, Admirals Cove, Turtle Creek, Jonathan's Landing, Tequesta Country Club, Loxahatchee Club, Bears Club, Jupiter Country Club, and Abacoa. So we pump all of the water to all these golf courses. All the golf courses, once we get it to them, then the golf course superintendent manages their irrigation rates. We have every one of our customers, we have a contract that specifies precisely the maximum amount of reclaimed water we'll send them a day. So if they irrigate more than that amount, then we will not send them, we will only send them our contractual allocation. But if it's raining a lot and their lakes are full, we won't send them any because their lakes are full. So they have to have capacity to receive that. Then in Abacoa, which is, if you know Jupiter area, it's a 4 square mile mixed use area from Roger Dean Baseball Stadium to homes, to university, to high school, to elementary school, to middle school, all the things. So their golf course draws water out of the storage lake, and then all of the communities in Abacoa, we manage the irrigation distribution system up to the front gate of those. So we literally have this really great closed system where we're measuring. Every red circle with an X inside of it is where we're measuring. So we measure the quality of water, we'll measure the quality of water that leaves our wastewater plant and flows into our storage lakes. That's step 1. That's the end of treatment. Step 2, we measure the water quality of our reclaimed water as it's leaving our storage lakes going to our customers. Step 3, we picked 4 of our customer lakes to sample, measure water quality: Jupiter Hills, Admirals Cove, Loxahatchee Club, and Abacoa. And these represent distance from the plant and a number of different factors. So it just was not practical to sample all of these lakes as much as we wanted to sample. So we sampled 4 of them. And then within Abacoa, we actually went in and we selected 4 sprinkler heads. And these sprinkler heads are separated by a half mile to about 3 miles. So they're not all like next door neighbors. They're quite spread out. So we sampled 4 sprinkler heads. And then I've said all of Abacoa by rule, if you do landscape irrigation in Abacoa, it's only with reclaimed water. And so the entirety of Abacoa is drained through 2 stormwater canals that ultimately go to the intracoastal and then the ocean. And then we sample downstream in those 2 stormwater canals. So we go, what is the quality of water leaving the wastewater treatment plant, leaving our on-site lakes, in our off-site lakes, leaving the sprinklers, the application point, and then downstream in these stormwater canals that drain this whole community. So a lot of detail there, but hopefully that gives you a good picture of where it is. Now just some graphical, right? Our wastewater treatment plant is here. We've got golf courses all over creation. And here's our wastewater treatment plant. Again, if you wanted to see that, wastewater treatment plant is here, Indiantown Road, I-95 at the Turnpike, Central Boulevard. Golf course, Jupiter Country Club, Indian Creek, Loxahatchee Club, Abacoa, Trump National, Bears Club, Admirals Cove West, Jonathan's Landing, Tequesta Country Club, Turtle Creek, River Bend, Jupiter Hills. So some pretty nice golf courses being irrigated with our water. Here's our wastewater treatment plant. And we're continuously upgrading and working on systematically maintaining and improving the quality of our wastewater treatment plant. And you can see these are the first two raised stabilization ponds. The water then leaves them and flows through the lakes, which you see are just off the picture. And if you've ever been to Bush Wildlife Sanctuary, they're right here. So water comes into our wastewater treatment plant, is treated through, discharges to our two on-site lakes, discharges through Lake 1, Lake 2, Lake 3, Lake 4, then pumped from here out to all of those golf courses and all of our customers. And on average, we have the water spends about 30 days in our on-site lakes. Big giant purple pipes. Anywhere you see purple in Florida on a pipe like this, it's a international standard color for reclaimed water. So that is recycled water that's being used typically for landscape irrigation. And here you can see our purple pipe distribution network where we're getting the water out to all of our customers. And so obviously wastewater treatment plants here, and then we're pumping that water to all of these different customers. You can see the golf courses. The yellow are the ones that we sampled the water quality in their lakes. The blue lightning bolts are where we sampled the Abacoa sprinkler heads. Gives you an idea of the spatial distribution of what we were looking at here. And tons of detail. This is in the paper. All of these fine details are in the paper that, again, the link is in the comments or chat. Area irrigated for each area, the amount of water that they get per day, and then the application rate, right? The gallons per acre per day. And so you can see here in Jupiter Hills, which is up on a sandy ridge, particularly dry. They have two components contracts that they get water from us. One of them is just under 5,000 gallons per acre per day, one 6,000. And you can see the average is 4,365. Again, sampling, right? Because sampling is so critical. There's the wastewater treatment plant. We see our golf course lakes where we sampled our sprinkler heads. This is a pump station inside Abacoa where we pump the water out to those sprinkler heads. And why do we do all of this? Good heavens, why? Because it turns out that people really like green grass in Florida. And I'm neither advocating for green grass or against green grass. I know that there is a major demand for green grass. And if they're going to have green grass, they have to irrigate. And I know that rather than having them pulling raw groundwater or using potable water to irrigate, the best source we believe is for them to use our recycled water. And I'm going to walk you through why I think it's the best. Again, we talked through the study site. We're going to sample what's a water quality look like at the end of our treatment, after the water's been in our lakes, after it's been in off-site lakes, after it comes out of sprinkler, and what it looks like in the downstream canal. And this is one of the downstream canals, right? This is alternate A1A is over here. I think I'm on Frederick Small Road, and this is looking north. And all of the water stormwater leaving Abacoa, the entirety of Abacoa is irrigated with reclaimed water. All of their stormwater flows through this canal. So if we were impacting downstream waters, we would see it here. And we analyze nitrogen, TKN, nitrate, ammonia, total phosphorus using these methods. If anyone wants to know, this is Sue, our lab manager, and I'll put you in contact with her if you want to critique any of the lab methods. And so now we're finally on results. We're only 20 something minutes into this, but you got to set the stage. So let's look. We sampled, top graph is total nitrogen, and it's divided between organic nitrogen and inorganic nitrogen. And the bottom graph is phosphorus, and this is just total phosphorus. The red dash line is the numeric nutrient criteria for surface waters in this part of Florida, in particular for the waters that the stormwater is discharging to. So you see numeric nutrient criteria for phosphorus is way below 1. It's like way below 0.5. And numeric nutrient criteria for nitrogen, I think, is in the vicinity of 1.25. That's kind of off the cuff, off my memory. So I think that's about right. So what happens? Secondary is what were the nutrient concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus after the water has been treated in a wastewater treatment plant. And they're what we've already said, right? They're kind of just under 20 and just under 3. Now, what happens to those nutrient concentrations as we go to our on-site storage lakes? Again, about 80 acres of lakes, and the water has been in those lakes for generally around 30 to 35 days, and sometimes slightly longer. And we see a massive decrease in inorganic nitrogen, and relatively organic nitrogen's unchanged. Then we move to the offsite and similar phosphorus reduction. We go to the offsite lakes and we're saying, what's happening here? Again, another nitrogen, inorganic nitrogen reduction, and organic nitrogen by and large remaining relatively unchanged. And then to the sprinklers. So this is where our reclaimed water is actually coming out and being applied to the landscape, and the significant reduction here. And then finally, what's going on with nutrient concentrations in the downstream canals? And honestly, these two bars being below the numeric nutrient criteria, these are 2 stormwater canals downstream of an area that is only and entirely irrigated with our reclaimed water to meet their landscape irrigation needs. So if there's landscape irrigation going on, it is using our reclaimed water that came out of these sprinklers with these nutrient concentrations. And we see in neither case are nutrient concentrations exceeding numeric nutrient criteria, not at all. And so what a terrific finding for us and how we manage our system. So about 85% reduction in inorganic nitrogen from the end of the treatment plant to our on-site lakes, 42 between the on-site and off-site lakes, 22 between the off-site lakes and sprinkler head, 39%, 20, and 19 on phosphorus. And what we believe is going on here, now we do not mechanistically know. We have not sleuthed out the mechanisms driving this. And if you're a young water quality person and you're looking for great ideas for opportunity, sleuthing out and like demonstrating what are the mechanisms driving these reductions is a great opportunity. But it seems to us like the nutrient spiraling, so nutrient uptake in the water column in the lakes, and then sedimentation and denitrification in the lake bed is driving this. And then curiously, offsite lakes, these lakes are a lot smaller than the on-site lakes, so the residence time is shorter. But we believe that there similar processes are occurring. We go from the treatment plant right into these on-site lakes through minimal piping. On-site lakes to off-site, there is meaningful piping, but then off-site lakes to sprinkler heads, there's significant piping. And we believe in these irrigation pipes, when the water is traveling through, we believe that we have evidence that there's significant denitrification occurring that's driving this. So you've got biological processes and physical processes occurring in the lakes, and then really interesting denitrification going on in the pipes, as at least a focused look on nitrogen. So then we want to go, we understand what the nutrient concentrations are, but because we know precisely how much water we send out to every customer, we wanted to talk about what are the nutrient loading rates. So we know nitrogen and phosphorus both decline significantly in our treatment system. And then what goes on, how much nitrogen and phosphorus are we loading? Well, in Abacoa, their actual irrigation rates are under 3,000 gallons per acre per day. Their contractual maximum is 4,365. We saw that number earlier in the table. So there's a difference between what the entities can contractually, what their maximum amount they can irrigate with per day is, and what they actually do, which is not surprising because during rain events, typically they're not irrigating. And then we standardize nutrient loading rates using pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus per 1,000 square feet per year, based on good IFAS research on turf grasses. And to put all this in context, we need to understand a little bit about rainfall. And so rainfall is on the left here, and there are the bars. And so look, I mean, even in the dry season, January, February, March, we're still getting significant amounts of rain. But look, you know, in March, we're here over around 6 inches per month. And then if you look at our max month, June, we're up, you know, getting close to 25 inches per month. So big swings in the amount of rainfall that's occurring monthly. And obviously the error bars are showing, you know, the variability here. But curiously, the reclaimed water application rate is not as variable as you might assume looking at the monthly totals. And that just has to do with how rain comes. It doesn't come, you know, in June, it's not coming, you know, 1 inch per day. It's coming in, you know, 4 or 5 inches in an afternoon, and then no rain, and then, you know, multiple significant rain days in a row, and then no rain. And so during the wet periods, the irrigation is turned off, but as soon as it stops raining, typically the irrigation's turned on. So the irrigation variability through the wet season, dry season is not as much as we would have assumed. So then we know precisely how much water is being applied to the landscape, and we know precisely the concentration of nitrogen and phosphorus in the water. So then we can say, okay, if we were irrigating straight out of the secondary treatment, what would be our nutrient application rate? But we know we have these 4 categories on this chart. If you will focus first on the sprinklers, because the sprinklers are where the irrigation actually occurs. Now we have 3 bars on down here. We're looking at nitrogen. Sorry, I got to get my head around. This is the actual and this is the maximum. Remember I said back here, our actual irrigation rate is 2,668 gallons per acre per day, and our max is 4,365. So we calculated nutrient loading rates using the actual and using the maximum, because a customer can use their maximum amount on a theoretical day. And so we wanted to know what that looked like. And then the 3 different color bars, well, depending on how perfectly lush you want your grass to look, IFAS recommends you may want to apply 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square foot per year, 4 pounds, or 6 pounds. Again, these are IFAS numbers. We just use them to benchmark against. So in either case, when we're looking at the nitrogen concentration coming out of our reclaimed water and being actually applied to the ground, it's only meeting 10 to 30% of the nitrogen demand by turf grasses based on actual irrigation rates. And if every day of the year the irrigation customer used 100% of their contractual allocation, they would only meet 15 to 46% of their nitrogen demand of their turf grass, depending again how perfectly lush they want their grass to look. This is where the irrigation is occurring. But we know that we're getting improved treatment all the way through the process. So we said, well, what would it look like if we irrigated out of the different points? And you have to go all the way back to secondary treatment, right, to right where the water comes out of the wastewater treatment plant before it hits the lakes, to see one of these bars exceed our recommended daily allowance. So what I can say is if we were irrigating directly from the end of our chlorine contact chamber, for current actual irrigation rates, we would be exceeding, almost doubling the nitrogen needs if you were trying to apply 2 pounds per year. If you were doing contractual maximum every day of the year, you would be exceeding in 2 places. But these are irrelevant because we're not using this to irrigate with. We're actually irrigating out of the sprinklers. And the take-home point is the nitrogen in the reclaimed water is at most meeting 1/3 to 1/2 of the recommended daily allowance as published by IFAS. So EW Consultants is a local environmental consultant. Abacoa as a community hired him when we first started getting our results back from this research. We're very excited and thought that Abacoa could save money by lowering how much fertilizer they applied to their turf grass. Because they have such a big area, they fertilize so much. We thought if they lowered their fertilization rate by, a quarter to a half, their grass would still be in great condition. They would save, 25 to 50% of their fertilizer budget. So they hired EW Consultants because they didn't want to take that chance without some more science. And Ed Weinberg hired a PhD turfgrass person. They did quantitative and qualitative assessments of turfgrass in Abacoa, and all the turfgrass plots that they assessed were irrigated with our reclaimed water. And they had plots that had 0 additional fertilizer, 50% of their normal fertilizer application rate, 75% and 100%. And what they found was that the plots fertilized with 75% of their normal fertilizer amount achieved nearly identical turfgrass quality to the plots getting 100%. And you're like, why could that be? So it says this is an area that was receiving, water from these sprinklers at this application rate. And lo and behold, when they reduced fertilizer application rate by 25%, there was no difference between the turf grass receiving 75% of the fertilizer and 100%. It's because the sprinklers are providing around 20%. So we felt like this result completely supported our other analytical findings. And it's like, how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and reclaimed water? A lot, but it depends where you sample the water. That helps you understand precisely how much. At the end of the treatment plant, there's there's nearly 20 milligrams per liter, but by the time we're coming out of sprinkler head, we're down to almost 3 milligrams per liter. How much nitrogen and phosphorus are loaded to turf grass, lawns, golf courses when we use reclaimed water for irrigation? Not nearly as much as we assumed, and as has been discussed in lots of other places. When we looked precisely at the amount of reclaimed water being applied to nutrient concentrations in that water, we demonstrated, that supplemental fertilization is still necessary in our system. And that's a key point, I don't think you can take these results and apply them everywhere. You have to look on whatever system you're curious in, and how similar is their reclaimed water system to what we're doing, limiting daily application rates, massive open water storage where we're getting significant treatment, major distribution pipeline where we're getting denitrification. These are all really relevant questions to be asked if you're worried about local irrigation, reclaimed water irrigation in your area. For our system, though, does responsible landscape irrigation with reclaimed water lead to a eutrophication of downstream waters, or excess nutrients and algae growth? Simple answer is no, not at all. Downstream canal samples showed nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations were both lower than numeric nutrient criteria for streams in peninsula region. And here, nitrogen 1.54 and total phosphorus 0.12, so pretty low levels. What did we learn? We get significant treatment in our green assets, In our reclaimed water storage lakes, inorganic nitrogen is massively assimilated when the nitrogen is sitting in these storage lakes and then being pumped to the downstream sites. Moving reclaimed water through the existing storage and transmission system is for us a cost and energy efficient option to achieve significant nutrient reduction. And we like to say we're getting AWT for free. This is not many times do you look at a wastewater treatment plant and think, oh, wow, that's pretty. This is a pretty picture of our wastewater treatment plant taken by Bobby Womer. And then funny, The open water lake, you can see our big IQ pumping distribution header, the reclaimed water pipeline. We got littoral plants on the edge. We've got, some limna over here floating. We got phytoplankton in the water. All of these autotrophs, I would joke and say, are also treatment plants. So you have the concrete and you have the green infrastructure treating this water. There are regulatory considerations, right? End-of-pipe concentrations are irrelevant based on our findings. The estimated nutrient loading rates are significantly overestimated when we focus on end-of-pipe nutrient concentrations. And that's what are the nutrient concentrations at the end of the concrete treatment, and ignoring all of the beneficial treatment in the lakes and distribution system. Additional research, because it's always fun to keep asking good questions and doing research. We need to better characterize water quality throughout reuse distribution systems, especially sprinkler heads. And now, not just our system, but other systems in the state. I think that's really important. We need to better understand variability of nutrient concentrations within and across distribution systems. What are other systems like? Are they being managed similarly effectively? And then we need to understand the mechanisms driving the reduced nutrient concentrations. How important is the biofilm in the reclaimed water distribution system? How important are phytoplankton and nutrient spiraling versus sedimentation and denitrification in the anoxic wetland sediments? These are all really interesting questions. And here's a picture. This is Roger Dean Stadium, St. Louis Cardinals, baseball world champs. This might be actually Boston getting ready to play the Cardinals. And the purple pipe here on the infield, this is our reclaimed water being used to spray down the infield. So Major League Baseball players, all kinds of people really coming to terms that reclaimed water is a valuable, beneficial resource that helps mitigate and lessen the impact of humanity on our natural resources. And with that, I'll stop sharing and look at the comments for fear of the crazy questions, hard questions we may have.
Great. Thank you so much. What a fantastic talk. And I know personally, I was just talking about reclaimed water with the Palm Beach County horticulture agent. So I'm going to be sending this presentation and your manuscript to her immediately. We do have a couple questions, so I'm going to start with that. And while we're doing that, I'm going to put up the evaluation for our participants. So if you can take 5 seconds and complete that, we'd appreciate it. Okay, so the first question is looking for your sort of professional guidance. That up in Titusville, they claim that they do not have to test pollution parameters in their stormwater ponds that flow into the Indian River Lagoon or their stormwater sewers because they use design predictions for the concentration of pollution parameters. They do not believe me when I say that they need to test the water. Can you provide a good explanation as to why testing needs to be done?
That's a great question. And I get the sense, Bill, that you're kind of more aligned with me. My curiosity will kill me. I just want to know. And whenever you go and sample, you actually are having a fact-based conversation. And when you say, oh, no, we're designed to design standards, so we're fine. You were assuming the various BMPs being relied upon are fully functional in the local setting. And that just never flies with me. Proof's in the pudding. Let's collect the data and let's look and see. So I would say there is a lot of literature out there that talks about various BMPs, whether agriculture, stormwater, that they can be very effective, but there's also good literature that says that they're not always as effective as they are presumed. And the way to determine that in any local setting is to just measure. And I would challenge them to measure and not rely on assumptions. And then beyond that, if they won't, then I would look for a local group, a local riverkeeper group, or even local high school volunteers who could sample and begin to collect data on that.
Great. The next question is about the availability of reclaimed water. Do other public facilities such as public parks, schools, ball fields, et cetera, have access?
Because the Loxahatchee River is in an area that is under a regional water availability rule, because salinity infiltration is a major threat to the Loxahatchee River, there are local rules, local at the water management level and local even at the town level, that require irrigation with reclaimed water. And so we do in the region, nearly all of, certainly inside Abacoa, all of the property, public parks, schools, everything is irrigated with reclaimed water. And then as we step outside of there, it depends how old the facility was, whether they use groundwater, potable, or other sources, or stormwater for landscape irrigation. But that's a really locally dependent question. And I think you have to start asking at the water management of your region, and then move down water management, county, town type of deal to understand that.
The next question might also have a similar answer. Are golf courses required to use reclaimed water?
And totally depends on, you know, where you are, how old the golf course is, etc. If there are limits on consumptive use permitting in the area, but certainly for us, every golf course within our service area is reliant on reclaimed water to meet their irrigation needs.
A comment about your graphs of rainfall and irrigation. Bill suggests that this can be used to show why Florida native plants can save a lot of irrigation water, or they may not need any irrigation as compared to turf. This would be a great way to promote replacing turf grass with native plants. And
that's, you know, that's an aesthetic discussion. Certainly, I'm a big fan of native vegetation. You know, convincing people that they don't need turf grass is an interesting discussion, I'll say. But I do agree that the irrigation rates and the seasonality of rainfall can contribute to those discussions.
And I'm going to put a plug in for our, I believe it's September 15th, our webinar, where we're going to have Dr. Paul Monahan, who is a social scientist. He's going to talk about exactly that, sort of homeowners and HOA perceptions of using treatment plants along their stormwater ponds as opposed to just turf. So, and how to work with HOAs and change those perceptions and behaviors.
Yeah.
Nicole says, asks, is there a suggested minimum distance to a water body or canal for using reclaimed water irrigation?
That's a great question. And honestly, I'm completely blanked on that. So the rule, the official state law 62610, which governs use of reclaimed water in the state, if that setback distance is in rule, it would be in 62610. If you just search Florida 62-610 and something like setback distance, I know there are setback distances from public potable water wells, and depending on the size of the well, I think it's either 75 feet or 150 feet. But I don't recall on surface water, so forgive me for that one.
So I am going to ping Elizabeth Kelly, our Martin County partner, for the Martin County fertilizer ordinance, which I believe has a 10-foot buffer zone for fertilization. Does that include reclaimed water, or is that just active fertilizer application?
That's just active fertilizer. That's just, yeah, do not apply fertilizer any closer than that setback.
Great, thank you for that clarification. You touched a little on this in your last slides, but Vincent wants to know what submerged aquatic vegetation is like in your treatment lakes. Is there any potential for adding to that increase in nutrient uptake?
So that's a great question, Vincent. And we actually, the lakes do not have submerged aquatic vegetation. So we have significant littoral shelves, you know, in emergent vegetation, but they do not have submergent vegetation. But nonetheless, we have a very high functioning food web based, you know, phytoplankton based. But there's no SAB in the lakes. Whenever I was a kid, I used to sneak in. I grew up in Jupiter. I used to sneak in and go fishing in our reclaimed water lakes. There was a gap in the fence back in the furthest away corner, and the lakes were managed completely differently back then. This is like, you know, 80s. I'm ancient old. The lakes were managed different, and they were really full of submerged aquatic vegetation. But since I think 87 or 88, when we began our reclaimed water system, the lakes are managed for water storage, not for habitat quality. So.
Great, thank you. And the entire purpose of the Water Ambassador Program is to learn and share. And so Bill is going to take this presentation when we load it to our YouTube page and share it with Brevard County. So thank you for that. I also think we have some of our colleagues from Brevard County on the line today. So hopefully they'll be able to assist with that transmission of information. Sabina adds that she wanted to share for another wastewater treatment facility that built a treatment pond for nutrients and monthly cleaning of the filters. This facility created so many after effects of the community and natural wildlife. They now have migratory birds and animals that have been seen in decades. Perfect. So she added some information about the Sweetwater wetlands and looks like Tucson, Arizona. So a lot of fantastic projects out there that utilize and rely on green infrastructure rather than just that traditional gray infrastructure. So thank you for sharing. We have about a couple more minutes, so feel free to, one more question. Do you have any good data on how much nutrient reduction littoral zone plantings can accomplish?
So there's a lot of literature out there on that. And I would just say there's a lot of lake management publications. IFAS has really good stuff and others. So I would say just go to the literature and look. I think in the introduction to ours, we cite at least one paper and talk about some others, both stormwater publications and lake management publications in general.
Thank you. And I think, Vincent, you can add to this. I think some of our colleagues are actually doing a study, a regional study across the state, looking at exactly this in a comparison of stormwater ponds. And one of their study sites is in Martin County. Is that correct, Vincent? Would be Dr. A.J. Reisinger?
Yes, I think so, but I can't recall where that is.
If any of you have an HOA that may be eligible for study with some good stormwater ponds ripe for plantings, let us know.
Nick Musia is also, he's actively planting SAV, that's Vallisneria americana, the American tape grass, in his stormwater ponds, and I think he was looking for HOA involvement as well.
Okay, fantastic. So we got one more minute. Feel free to put in your last minute questions. And in the meantime, Albrey, thank you so much for your fantastic presentation and for presenting to the water ambassadors.
Cool. Thanks for having me. I appreciate everyone. Don't hesitate to reach out if you get the paper and you have questions or whatever. It would be my pleasure. So thank you.
And Sabina, I put the link in there again for access. All right, Bill, Vincent, or I will be in touch to get more information about your condo. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you on September 5th to learn about another local citizen science project. And don't forget to register for the field trip led by Dr. Albrey. Thanks,
Cool.
everyone. Have a great day.
See you.
Thanks, everybody.